Well, joining us from Singapore is Samir Puri. He's a visiting lecturer in war studies at King's College London. Good to have you with us. So, reports of US tankers trying to sneak through the Strait of Hormuz with radar switched off. Reports of US strikes on Iranian coastal assets. When you put all this together, Samir, is the US trying to undermine Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz? Is that the bottom line here?
Yes, it's trying to show that Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz is control in name, but not in deed. And there is some irony, of course, in US ships or US flagged ships trying to move with their signals turned off. That's, of course, what ships have been doing to try to break sanctions that have been placed on Iran for many years. In terms of trying to, I wouldn't say change facts on the ground, because this is, of course, a maritime space. There's obvious attempts by the US to try to show that Iranian claims to be able to control the Strait of Hormuz are unsustainable. And I think that is also, around the two other big issues that you've been reporting on. One is the exchange of fire, and the other is sanctioning this new Iranian body that's supposedly set up to manage the ships that enter and exit the Strait of Hormuz.
So is this really about gaining more leverage in negotiations?
Leverage is always the currency in which negotiators deal in. There is so much at stake for Iran and for the USA, less so for Israel, which I think, just having brought the US into this war, I think Israel has already got a win. Obviously, Israel will have an interest, but Israel is not party to these negotiations in terms of the mediation that Pakistan is managing. But the leverage, and I think this is very, very important for us to be observing right now and in the coming days and weeks, is who is actually generating a critical mass of leverage to pressure the other side into accepting terms they may otherwise not have wanted to accept.
Okay, is it possible at this point to draw any conclusion? You said the US is trying to show that Iran is not in control. Are these attacks working, or are they having the opposite effect? Because they might scare off shippers to say, well, if there's shooting going on, we'll stay away from trying to cross the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, you make a very intriguing point, which is the remedy may be worse than the cure it allows, because if the US, by militarizing its response to Iranian buildup around the Strait of Hormuz, contributes to a very militarized situation, and if indeed Iran has struck a US base from which Iran says that some of American military activity has been mounted from, then we may be in for tit-for-tat exchanges that are focused on military targets. So there's just two reflections on that which are very important. The first is the ceasefire, broadly speaking, is holding, and how can that be if there's fighting? Well, the infrastructure attacks and the attacks on ships, that's really where I think we've seen so much of the destruction caused over the last couple of months. If indeed the conflict goes through a metamorphosis and sits where it currently sits now, which is attacking each other's military assets, that is a smaller scale. Arguably, that's something that can be prevented from escalating, hopefully. But I think the point you're making is a very important one, which is if that persistence of tit-for-tat military action persists as both Iran and the US vie for control of the Strait of Hormuz, then that in itself imperils passing shipping.
And then we've also got to talk about these US sanctions. Are they likely to have an impact? Because what we heard on Tuesday, the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, made a statement saying 25 ships had crossed the Strait of Hormuz in 24 hours in coordination with Iran, with Iranian permission. Now, if some of this is going through or making payments through cryptocurrency and sort of back channel ways, is that likely to be impacted by sanctions?
Really important points here is one is how this so-called Iranian toll is operating. It's, I suppose in your mind's eye, you might imagine, well, what happens as a ship captain sort of literally hand over bags of cash? Well, not at all. I think some of the governments that have come to agreement with Tehran to allow their ships to pass maybe finding other ways to compensate Iran, to make Iran feel that it's, the toll is being paid. which then brings into question the efficacy of the US sanctions. I think the idea the US would sanction this body is inevitable. It's a muscle the US has exercised repeatedly for decades now in terms of sanctioning Iranian support for proxy armed groups, Iranian nuclear activity, and so on. To me, one of the really interesting telltale signs is whether there'll ever be European sanctions later down the line to follow the US sanctions or not. Whether there may be governments around the world that are looking at this and thinking, well, we may have to work with Iran to get shipping through rather than trying to defeat Iran because, well, that ship has sailed, pardon the pun.
All right, now bear with us, Samir, because Donald Trump has had some comments about Oman. Just let's listen in to what he had to say to remind ourselves.
The strait's going to be open to everybody.
And who would control it?
It's international waters. Nobody's going to control it. We're going to watch over it. We'll watch over it, but nobody's going to control it. That's part of the negotiation that we have. They would like to control it. Nobody's going to control it. It's international waters, and Oman will behave just like everybody else, so we'll have to blow them up. They understand that. They'll be fine.
So Oman, they're being threatened to be blown up. Oman has mediated conflicts for the US. The US has a military facilities access agreement with the country. How should we take those sorts of comments about we'll blow them up if they don't do what we want?
Yeah, it's really surprising. It was Oman that was helping to mediate just before Epic Fury was launched in 28th of February this year. So Oman has played a skillful regional hand in trying to stay a little bit apart from some of the conflicts and offering sort of mediation support. But I think after, it's a different example, after Israel bombed the negotiators in Doha around Hamas and that, I think no one is no target is off limits in terms of the way wars are being waged in the last few years. So I think based on that precedent, you should definitely take it seriously. But I'd also say in terms of Trump's comments, these sound more like a statement of intent. And the statement of intent being, no, Iran will never control the Strait of Hormuz. And from an Iranian perspective, they may be thinking, well, Trump's got, a couple of years more in office. Can we string this out for how long? Without having to give up at the negotiating table, but maybe keeping the negotiations going. And I can't see how bombing Oman would necessarily change Iran's calculus in that.
What kind of message does that send out to American allies in the region?
A terrible message, because the initial message was, well, we've moved from being this guarantor of security in the Middle East to embroiling you in a conflict that you were not a party to starting, right, to the Gulf partners, America's Gulf partners. To say this about Oman, I think will send shockwaves across the region.
So not a very positive message. All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much, Samir Puri there from King's College London, joining us from Singapore.